So thank you so much for listening to our session today. So we cordially encourage you to add your question and chat feedback, comments through the chat box on Passable. We will try to do our best to respond to your question, comments through Passable during session or either after our session. So everybody, now we would like to start our session called Asia Focus Water Cycle Management for Resilient and Equal Society. My name is Yumiko Asayama, Manager of Japan Water Forum and also the Secretariat of the Asia Pacific Waters Forum. I am leading 3 Asia Focus sessions in Stockholm World Water Week 2021 as the regional coordinator of Stockholm World Water Week. So today, our session is organized as a milestone towards the Asia Pacific Water Summit to be held in April 2022, Kumamoto City in Japan, which aim to encourage the leadership of heads of states and government of 49 countries in Asia and the Pacific to accelerate multi-stakeholders action and partnership urgently and decisively for resilience by ensuring water cycle at each Beijing. As you know, Asia Pacific faces accelerating pressure to provide water security for its vast population, especially for those vulnerable groups. The COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated the Asia Pacific region's current vulnerability. Without fully understanding the rapid changing of hydrometeorological interaction using the best available science and data, and communicating them well to the public of each country, achieving the necessary resilience within short time frame will be not possible. So this session brings together a diverse group of speakers from Asia and the Pacific and examine and enhance understanding of all elements of the water cycle and put in place water governance mechanism to enhance resilience and delivery on its commitment of SDG 6 and other water-related goals. Today, we will have 6 presenters. Then after the presentation, we will move on to the panel discussion with the 6 presenters and also audience. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Kurt Gallian. He is the section head Chief of Sustainable Urban Development Section of Environment and Development Division of ESCAP. Now, I would like to invite Kurt for presentation. Thank you, Kurt.
Thank you very much, Yumiko, and thank you for the kind introduction. My name is Kurt Garrigan. I'm with UN ESCAP, and we're pleased to be part of the Asia Pacific Water Forum and to join this session along with the other partners in the forum. I just want to introduce some work that ESCAP has done to really look at the relationship between SDG 6 and COVID-19 impacts and responses across the region. Yumiko has already introduced the issue of the pandemic and the progress towards SDG 6. And so we'll provide here some analysis that we've developed for the Asia Pacific Water Forum. When we look at regional progress against the Sustainable Development Goals, ESCAP does this on an annual basis. And what you see here is that essentially progress on SDG 6 in recent years continues, but remains too slow to meet the 2030 targets. And in fact, in one of the targets on 6.4.2, or the indicator, there is actual regression on water stress. What you see here in this table indicates that in yellow against all of these.
Kurt, we cannot see your presentation slide.
You don't see my slide?
Yes. So can you share the document? Yes.
Can you see it now? It's happened again.
Yes, yes, we can find, yeah, we can see it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so apologies for that. So what I was presenting is that the analysis that ESCAP has done is indicated that progress is too slow on SDG 6. And in fact, this is actually progress is too slow against most of the SDGs in the Asia Pacific region. But what you see here in this table in the middle is against the targets 6.1, 6.2, 6.6, 6A, and 6B, that the region really needs to accelerate progress if we are to achieve the target by 2030. There is actual regression against water use efficiency, and so we need to reverse the trend against target 6.4. For some targets, as you know, there is insufficient data to measure and monitor the progress against many of the SDGs, and that is also the case here against SDG 6 in terms of water quality and transboundary water cooperation. There is simply not sufficient data to effectively measure progress. But as it relates to COVID-19 and its impact on the SDGs, we see that without addressing the progress against these targets, an additional 636 million people remain vulnerable and at risk of increased poverty. In East Asia and the Pacific alone, there are 369 million people still without access to basic sanitation and 134 million without access to improved drinking water. We all know, and it's been well documented, that obviously water and sanitation measures and interventions are essential not just for meeting the objectives of the 2030 agenda, but really to strengthen public health and to prevent disease and future pandemics. So if we looked a bit more closely in the findings of our policy brief, we see that in SDG target 6.1, that there have been obviously significant impacts on utilities. The reduced industrial water demand that resulted from the lockdowns and other measures, an emergency suspension of billing, threatened sustainable cost recovery. While this had cash flow implications for the utilities, there is the potential for a longer term impact on the ability to finance and sustain infrastructure improvements to reach those targets that I've mentioned earlier. In 6.2, we've seen reductions through WASH in lots of diseases, but what we are missing here is that in the recoveries and the response to COVID, we need much more cost-effective investment for development and pandemic preparedness. It's not just a matter of increasing WASH. It's now that WASH is a critical and foundational intervention to prevent future pandemics and to respond to the COVID-19 issues. In 6.3, while I mentioned that there was short-term reduced industry use of water resources during the lockdowns, there's also been an increase, more than double, plastic debris entering river basins and water basins. So while we are improving water quality potentially, we are creating, and COVID-19 responses have created some more environmental issues that need to be planned going forward. In 6.4, there has been an increased groundwater demand for household agriculture as some of the supply chains have been disrupted. And this has implications potentially for food security going forward. In 6.5, there has been an increase in COVID-driven official development assistance resources to support countries in developing member states on integrated water resource management. And there's some level of transboundary cooperation in that respect. However, the long-term planning for pandemic and resilience are new considerations for water managers. These are not issues that have been addressed effectively before or been in integrated water resource management planning initiatives. So we see that the pandemic has has revealed some emerging issues that also need to be taken into account in further planning. And in 6.6, again, as I mentioned, this has much broader implications and intersections with other SDGs, including on sustainable cities, on health, on infrastructure. The environmental degradation and land use trends that we see are increasing the risk of disease exposure, and there are greater commitments needed to protect water resources and overall ecosystems. Let me just dive a little bit more deeply into some of the priority areas that the analysis indicates. On financing, I think it's well known that there's been a global reduction in GDP of about 3.4%. Local governments have increased public health spending, and in part as a result, the ability to finance water infrastructure has been likely stressed. Local revenues are down, economic stimulus is reducing intergovernmental transfers to local authorities and localized projects, and really looking more at some economic stimulus. Whether that trickles down into water utilities still remains to be seen. On data and information, we know that data on SDG 6 generally is limited, but for the first time, we've seen in the 2020 analysis that ESCAP has done some data on each of the indicators for all of the region's countries. So one of the things that we need to continue to promote is the collection, the gathering, the interpretation, and the use of data against the SDG targets and indicators. In capacity development, this is particularly important to ensure that service provision is at a level that is conducive to protect at-risk groups and prevent mass displacement in the urban and rural poor contexts. Most of the issues that we see in terms of pandemic clusters in urban areas are in informal settlements that obviously don't have the water and sanitation infrastructure that is needed. And so that has again revealed where there should be some investment priorities and building capacity.
Could you move on to the wrap up for your presentation?
Yes, I'm on my last slide. And then in terms of innovation, we need communications of public wash messaging. And one thing to point out on governance is that 85% of countries in the region have COVID recovery plans that did not take into account sufficiently environmental considerations. So there are some clear recommendations on strengthening WASH to take into account vulnerable groups, especially in national recovery plans, continue to improve hand washing facilities as pandemic measures, protect frontline WASH and healthcare workers, support local community organizations and civil society, address the issue of plastic waste recovery, especially in wastewater, strengthen the collection of data, and look at human health markers in integrated water resource management policy designs, strengthen the capacity of local governments, and address economic recovery issues that address water-related ecosystems. And as always, continue to look at opportunities for public-private partnerships. These are some further resources. All of this information is available online in this SDG 6 and COVID-19 policy brief that you see on the left, which is available through the ESCAP website. We also have the SDG progress report from which much of this information was drawn, and the Economic and Social Survey of Asia and the Pacific. With that, thank you very much, and I'll turn it back over to the moderator.
Yes, thank you, Kurt. I also thank you for making the accelerating progress toward SDG 6 in the Asia Pacific region in the context of COVID-19 report under the collaboration with APWF. I also thank you so much for your very comprehensive analysis about the impact of COVID-19 and also SDG 6. This result will be best used for the Asia Pacific Water Summit. Now, we would like to invite Dr. Pierre Flamand, Manager of International Affairs of Japan Sanitation Consortium. He will talk about the current status and vision for wastewater reclamation in Japan. So, Pierre, floor is for yours.
Thank you very much, Yumiko-san. So I will quickly start. Okay, so first of all, some background points about reclaim wastewater. Basically, it's with population growth and urbanization that there is a concern over water shortages in many countries and regions around the world. So wastewater reclamation, or water reuse, is increasingly important as an alternative resource in the water cycle to meet different water needs. So we can say today that wastewater reclamation is no longer an issue, but the question remains about how to reclaim, make reclamation efficient and safe, considering the intended or final purpose, and how to integrate it in the water cycle with the existing conventional water and wastewater systems. So concretely, reclaimed wastewater becomes a reality when water resources are or become insufficient, for example, with population growth in cities. So in the case of Japan, Japan enjoys relatively good water resources with an average precipitation rate of 1,780 millimeters per year, which is about twice of the world average. But there are also high amounts of water loss during floods or by evaporation. Japan has also a small land area, which means that the water flowing in rivers go quickly into the sea. So as well as in other countries in Japan in recent years, there have been greater fluctuation of rainfall exacerbated by climate change. So a stable supply of water is not always expected. So this is the situation currently in Japan for water reuse or reclaimed wastewater. You can see that only 1.4% of reclaimed wastewater is reused. So in the past, there have been several drought episodes which stress the reliability of water supply systems. So to overcome this situation, wastewater reclamation projects were implemented in major urban areas in Japan from the 1980s. But with, as I mentioned, with only 1.4% of water reuse, we cannot say that the water is reused at large scale in Japan. And the main reason is that it is still cheaper in most situations in Japan to use water supplies and to construct and use to construct wastewater reclamation facilities and to reuse water, especially because of the additional cost of the facilities, but also due to the high energy consumption. So to boost this situation and to change the situation, the Japanese government established a new wastewater system vision in 2014 with the aim of doubling the number of wastewater reclamation facilities in the cities of more than 100,000 people. So this is a major policy, the main policy that has been implemented. So, for example, in the passage of water is to utilize 100% of rainwater and also reclaim wastewater and spring water. In the passage of resources is to create resource recovery and supply networks to prevent global warming and deal with future resource depletion. So now I'm going to give three practical examples, three case studies of water reuse or from reclaimed wastewater in Japan. So first of all, we start with the first project that started in Japan in 1980. So this is the city of Fukuoka, which suffers from water stress, so not enough water in the city. Fukuoka City is a city of 1.5 million people in the Kyushu Island in southwest Japan. So it became, as I mentioned, the first city in Japan to supply reclaimed wastewater. So currently there are 2 reclamation facilities within the city for a total capacity of nearly 12,000 cubic meters per day. The reclaimed wastewater is used in more than 450 locations over nearly 1,500 hectares, mainly for toilets in large buildings and sprinklers in parks or for watering trees. The second example I'm going to show is a city in Japan called Saitama City, which is a city in northern Tokyo with 1.2 million people. So this is a different project. Basically, the new city urban center of Saitama City was going to be constructed. And from the planning stage of the urban project, so the city development, the developers, as well as the cities they discussed and the prefectures discussed about installing, water reclamation for using reclaimed wastewater, but also using rainwater for the new buildings that were going to be installed. So this is so under the responsibility of the building owners, the reclaimed wastewater is supplied into each building, including the Saitama Super Arena that you see on your right here. This is a multi-purpose indoor arena with a spectator capacity of 36,500 people. So from the roof here, rainwater is reused. And also, so from the wastewater, the treated wastewater is reclaimed into the building of the city, So you can see that because it was done at the from the planning stage of the new urban center, you have different piping systems that have been installed, which, of course, it could be installed from the beginning of the project, so it could reduce the cost of the project. And the last example I'm going to show is from a small town in the Shikoku Island, which is called Tadotsu. So this is a city which suffers regularly from drought and water shortage, basically due to low rainfall. So in that case, there have been 13,000 cubic meter per day that have been from Tadotsu town and other cities that are treated in a wastewater treatment plant. And about 70% of it, 77% of this wastewater is sent to a reclamation facility that is used for river restoration, irrigation for agriculture, parks, gardens, groundwater recharge, and the augmentation of the stream and brooklets running through the town. So my conclusion would be that wastewater reclamation is an effective option to reduce the impact on water resources, as well as the cost of energy and energy involved in water resource management. However, because we have conventional water and wastewater systems that are almost the same for decades now, or even more than 100 years, so new approaches for water and wastewater systems are needed for an efficient and cost-effective integration of wastewater reclamation in the water cycle. So as I showed with my example in the new urban center in Saitama City, introducing wastewater reclamation in existing building or in an existing urban area is difficult and costly. So it is beneficial and cost-effective to promote wastewater reclamation at the planning stage of new development areas. In Japan, reclaimed wastewater is being used mainly for stream flow augmentation and landscape irrigation, particularly because of the urbanization in the main city centers. However, utilization is still limited as the cost of water supply remains in many areas cheaper than that of reclaimed wastewater. As I explained, there has been a promotion of reclaimed wastewater projects through the new concept and policies pushed by the wastewater system vision 2020. It's not 2021, sorry, it's 2100. Expectation for which expect for an increased integration of wastewater reclamation projects through subsidies, and also new initiatives to develop technologies that will reduce the cost and energy involved in wastewater reclamation. So I can say that in Japan, wastewater reclamation is strongly considered, but still not used widely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pierre-san, for your very comprehensive presentation about the water cycle management in terms of wastewater reclamation in Japan with 3 case studies. And next, I would like to invite Dr. Manohara. She is a country representative of Nepal and South Asia of International Water Management Institute. She is the expert of gender, inclusive and governance and lead social science research on water, natural resource, and climate change in South Asia. So Manohara, I would like please, I would like to invite Dr. Manohara for her presentation. Thank you, Manohara.
Thank you, Mika-san. Hello, everyone. Greetings from Kathmandu. Yes, today I am very pleased to share our research work on promoting gender equality and social inclusion through scientific evidence and policy engagement in the context of water, where our mandate is. So I'll briefly, before going to share how EMI is trying to integrate gender social inclusion in water and related sector research, I want to briefly highlight what EMI is doing. As you all know, the EMI is a research for development organization, which has been operating for over the last 3 decades in Asia and Africa. So we are also tackling 3 global challenges: food, climate change, and growth. So that is really the basis for our work in Asia region, in other region also. So we are trying to address 3 challenges through our organized research around 3 strategic program area: water, food, ecosystem first, second is water, climate change, and resilience, and third is water for growth and inclusion, where the gender and social inclusion comes as a part of research processes and also focus research to build the resilience of people, especially women, youth, marginalized community impacted by climate change, other drivers, including COVID pandemic. So very briefly talking about why we need to consider or integrate gender and social research on water solution for building the resilience of the people impacted by climate change and COVID pandemic, especially in the South Asia context, I'm going to focus today. So in terms of South Asia context, the gender role are very much changing rapidly. More women are involved in farm as well as the institution of public and private sector and market. If you look at the Nepal scenario and India scenario, other country of South Asia, more than 70% of farm labor producer are women. And they are also coming up slowly in the business, small micro enterprises, and more women are on the institutional structure. In case of Nepal, 26% of women professionals are in public sector, doing very much serving public sector services and input. And politically also very much coming up, transformation processes coming up. We can see more than 40% women in case of Nepal are in the new structure of governance, is local government in the context of federalism. Having such a change, despite the change is taking place in terms of women coming forward in different sphere, but persistent gender equality exists in the region, including Nepal, in terms of unequal power relation. Women, and especially coming from marginalized community, are very much in the bottom line of the power relation. They also have a limited resources opportunity when it comes to development research and natural resource, including water. So in that context, if we look at research and science, there has been limited effort on gender transformative research, action, and knowledge system. This scenario constantly asks, we as a research institute, what do we do with our research without considering gender social equity lens into our research process and practices? So now I'm going to share very briefly 3 project cases where we are trying to make our effort to integrate gender and social inclusion lens in our research area. First is that we are working on framework for scaling sustainable inclusive farmer-led irrigation development in Nepal in order to support the resilience, build the resilience of the COVID-19 affected population. In this research area, we are doing systemic analysis of barrier opportunity for scaling sustainable inclusive farmer-led irrigation with an interconnected dimension of it. So it includes policy governance, policy public-private sector, agriculture value chain, irrigated supply chain, COVID impact and its response, and gender social inclusion. This process of research is very multi-stakeholder led and also very much interaction with the policymaker, private sector, right holder, implement agency. So our aim is to develop a comprehensive framework that will guide policymakers for investment in farmer-led irrigation development in Nepal that really target women, youth, marginalized groups to participate in, benefit from farmer-led irrigation scaling in Nepal. So this framework is also expected to advance the role, agency, and knowledge of women and marginalized groups in the process of scaling farmer-led irrigation and irrigated-related governance and processes. So second work I want to highlight here is our work on solar irrigation for agricultural resilience in South Asia. This is Nepal, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. This project really aim to contribute to achieve equitable and climate resilient agricultural outcome through the research on better understanding policy, finance, institution, technological, and livelihood impact of the solar-based irrigation technology in order to tackle inequality, improving livelihood in the South Asia region. So particularly in case of Nepal, we are doing qualitative gender social inclusion research to assess solar irrigation technology, access, adoption, and decision-making by women and marginalized groups. Our aim here is to what extent solar irrigation technology processes are really gender social equity oriented. So our expected contribution from this research is an impact study or research report will really guide policy maker for in the water food energy nexus sector in making solar irrigation technology service accessible for smallholder and women who don't have access at the moment technology irrigation. So there's really challenge there. So the gender and social inclusion report will really support gender discourse on solar irrigation pump, which is beyond that clean pumping. So it will help transform global food system and support to achieve gender and social inequality in the region. Very briefly, the third aspect of our work is that inclusivity in federalism in Nepal to strengthen the sustainability of water supply system by promoting gender social inclusion in community water management and local governance, local water governance. One of the challenges Nepal facing is that we have a many water supply system.
To wrap up?
Sure. There is a functionality issue. So we are trying to understand how gender power relation affect the functionality, sustainability water supply system. So through this research, we are expecting to generate discourse on inclusive wash as a solution to improve health and livelihood while promoting women agency, voice in climate resilient wash planning, decision making, and also support enhanced capacity development of newly established local government on making wash supply system decision making responsive. So our basic learning and action is that there is a need. Interdisciplinary scientific research is very much important that looked at both biophysical and social dimension of water solution, which is also key to the resilience building. Second learning is that scaling farmer-led irrigation development and solar irrigation community managed water supply system can be a solution, sustainable solution to build the resilience of people impacted by climate change and COVID. So there is still a lack of gender transfer policy and institutional measures which need to be improved. So integrating gender social inclusion approaches to wash planning and decision making is very important for sustaining functioning of water supply system. More support is needed in Nepal context to strengthen capacity of local government water user groups. So invest in water policy, institutional processes, and scientific innovation that enhance the resilience of women and marginalized groups. Thank you, Amika-san.
Thank you, Manohara, for your very, very informative presentation about the water cycle management in terms of irrigation, development, and resilience toward inclusive societies, including the introduction, how you are doing the capacity enhancement for farmers and so on. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Osamu Kondo. He is Director of Secretariat of Water Cycle Policy Headquarters, Cabinet Secretariat of Japanese government. So I will share your presentation slide. So Kondo-san, can you see your presentation document from screen?
Yes, I can
Okay.
see your the screen. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Can I start? Okay. Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning to all of you. Today, I'd like to share with you the outline of the water management on the sound water cycle policy. Next slide, please. Please click in order to show everything in this slide. Okay, thank you. To begin with, I'd like to explain why we focus on the cycle of water. As shown in the picture left, water continues to circulate by the solar energy and the gravity. In the circulation process, people utilize water in a wide variety of ways. For example, if someone utilizes too much water, another person may not use enough water. If someone pollutes water, the effect will widely spread in the circulation process. Yes, we focus on the cycle of water because we have to become aware of water as public nature. That's one of the important viewpoints on the sound water cycle policy. Next, let me explain the current situation of water. Because of the futures of the water cycle written in the slide, Japan concentrated on building various water-related infrastructure from the late 1960s. However, as the infrastructure development progressed and the society got matured, the current situation described in the slide, such as rapid urbanization, etc., took place. The conventional development by means of infrastructure didn't work well. So we need to manage water more effective and comprehensive manner for the sustainable and inclusive development. Next slide, please. The slide explains approaches to overcome the current issue. Please show everything. Firstly, the structure reform at national level was undertaken. The Basic Act on Water Cycle Policy was enacted and the headquarters was established in the cabinet to promote cooperation among the governments. In addition, water was prescribed as public nature in the act, which was also an important point. And the basin level approach is more important because it is local entities that put the national plan into practice. So the concept of water cycle management is adopted, which focuses on written like this. I don't explain everything because of the time limitation. Next slide, please. On this slide, I'd like to briefly explain 3 good examples of water cycle management. The first one is the case of Kumamoto City. Kumamoto established the Groundwater Foundation to promote water management. They eagerly coordinated with governments, businesses, universities, residents, etc., and published the action plan to conserve groundwater for the next generation and carried out the plan based on the consensus. The second example is the case in Miyagi Prefecture. They adapted the 4 indicators to measure the degree of the sound water cycle described in the slide. By the indicators, they can understand the current situation precisely and achieve evidence-based discussion. The third example is the case in the Hadano City. They developed the water cycle models and groundwater flow visualization model to analyze the water cycle mechanism, including groundwater. By this model, the city estimated the amount of reserves of groundwater. Next slide, please. The last slide is the conclusion. First, think water as public nature. The second, institutional arrangement is essential at national level. Third, Beijing level approach by all stakeholders is also important. The fourth, data management and technology is also helpful. Thank you for your attention.
Kondo-san, thank you so much for your very concise presentation introducing Japan's policy and also the cases in local level of Japan. Now, I would like to move on to invite Dr. I.J. Kim, Director General of Chief Research Fellow, Water and Land Research Group of Korea Environmental Institute. He will talk about the current progress and the challenge of national water reform in Korea. So, Dr. I.J., floor is for yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Yumiko. Hi, my name is I.J. Kim again at Korea Environment Institute. Thanks for having me in this meaningful session of the Water Week. What I'm going to briefly introduce to you today is national water reform in Korea. For those who need to know modern economy and water development of Republic of Korea, this is the slide of the one page of the summary. In short, the Korean economy or gross income per capita was deeply combined with water management, including flood mitigation, hydropower, water supply, and wastewater. The slide you see now, 5 water ministries in Korea and their policy function respectively. As you saw earlier, Korea water management was successful with remarkable economic growth. But at the same time, it had a serious problem, policy incoherence and management inefficiency. In particular, water quantity and regional water works were governed by MOLIT, while water quality, local water works, and economic ecosystem management by MOE. We all know that having a number of water ministries cannot be a problem because water management requires a specific expertise and knowledge, but fragmented authority in Korea caused less collaboration and lowered coordination capacity more than 30 years. While there were 10 water-related acts in 1960s, recently there are more than 80 water-related acts, as well as 60 types of water plans based on these water acts. In previous slide, I talked about policy incoherence and management inefficiency. This slide is one example of problem in case of the river restoration project. I estimate the benefits of integrated river restoration project, and I conclude that the benefits would be greater than $6.35 billion at least. In addition to that, for 25 or 30 years, unreasonable investment was continued in water supply, green infra, and hydrometeorology. We all know that water policy is a central part of the world politics. In 8th of June 2018, Government Organization Act was revised finally. For 30 years, governments and political parties, either conservative or liberal, failed this legal reform more than 6 or 7 times. Based on this reform, MOE responsible for integrated water management with about 70 officials and K water staffs, and about $11 billion of national budget shift. The Water Framework Act was established for the first time. According to this act, Presidential Water Commission and 4 basin water commissions were launched to harmonize various water policies between water ministries. Also, the first national water plan was developed last June, and the implementation of this plan will be monitored annually according to the act. These are really huge transformation in Korean water sector. My research team estimate SDG 651 IWRM or IWM, as we see this slide, enabling environment, institution, or participant rate between 2017 or 2020 has been improved well, even though we have a lot of work to do. In conclusion, rapid economic growth was able to, because of the timely suitable investment and the great efforts on water development. But since 1994, government institutional arrangement was not changed, but heavily fragmented, while policy incoherence management inefficiency hindered sustainable water management. So after the first national water reform in Korea, we have to look at how we reduce the number of the water plants. How do we promote the policy coherence and the water efficiency in the coming future? Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Dr. IJ, for very informative about the Korean government policy and also the shift of institutional architecture and how Korean government and also multi-stakeholder in Republic of Korea is promoting the new policy for water cycle management and also integrated water resource management in the Republic of Korea. So our final presentation is Dr. Hans Tenka-Truslub. He is UNESCO Regional Scientific Bureau for Asia and the Pacific. So Hans, floor is for yours.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to close this session with a few brief comments on assessing SDG progress from the water cycle management stakeholder perspective. Now, we began our session today with an overview of the progress towards SDG 6 in Asia and the Pacific. And as we heard from Kurt's presentation, we've had considerable advance in the region, but not sufficient to meet the 2030 targets. We have regression observed in terms of water stress. I think we can take that as a warning of the future challenges and increasing pressure we will face in a climate change dominated future going forward. We also heard how the COVID-19 pandemic has had, and it continues to have, a severe impact on the region, pushing people towards poverty, and of course impacting the way that we live and manage and work with water across the So we know the regional picture, and we heard from the other presenters today several examples of how this water cycle management situation context is at the moment. But how does progress look from the perspective of the individual water cycle management stakeholder, organization, and professional? This is what we would like to try with this session to look a bit further into. So in a sense, this session here at the Stockholm International Water Week is an open invitation to all of you who wish to make your voice heard. We've developed a basic template. We've started by inviting all of the speakers at today's session to share their thoughts and impressions and progress on the progress towards SDG 6 and other water-related goals and targets on the 2030 agenda. We'd like to invite you to do the same. What we want to do is to collate all of these inputs and suggestions and ideas and impressions towards a regional publication as a contribution towards the 4th Asia Pacific Water Summit, which will be held in Japan next year. Now, I'd like to give you just a few snapshots from our presenters, a few of our presenters here today who have already filled in this stakeholder assessment to try to give you an idea of what this can do in terms of supplementing the regional assessment that we opened with. And I just include a few snapshots from some of our presenters. We heard Manohara earlier speaking from IWMI in Nepal. In her assessment and in the assessment from IWMI Nepal, she talked about how the COVID-19 pandemic has brought increased attention to investment in health and sanitation. So there is an opportunity to conceptualize and implement WASH as solutions for those who have been impacted by COVID-19, especially women and youth and marginalized groups. So there is perhaps some important lesson and shift in thinking associated. At the same time, WASH responses to the impact of COVID-19 are impacted by lack of policy, lack of funding, lack of institutional mechanisms. So there we have an example of how the ongoing pandemic and the situation makes a particular impact, both in terms of shifting priorities, but also in terms of impacts on people. We see that because we have this stakeholder level assessment of the situation in a particular country. From Pierre and from Japan Sanitation Consortium, we see a strong statement on the need to focus on sanitation as an essential component of water cycle management, but that we are still facing access issues, access to safe sanitation, to wastewater sludge treatment across the region. So we have an appeal, a very strong appeal for focus to be placed on a particular area. Just two more very quick snapshot, this time from Japan, from our contributors from the Japan Water Forum. We have a comment that there is a shortage of labor in forests and farmlands and other areas that contribute to the maintenance and recovery of a sound water cycle. So we certainly see that we, in fact, are in a situation in parts of the region where we need people, we need labor to help maintain a water cycle. We have an example of a solution or a step towards addressing issues around water cycle management through the establishment of a Kumamoto Groundwater Foundation that brings together local governments for research, for collating of data, results, research, sharing of information. So we have examples of key issues identified at the local level, but also examples of solutions and how we can move towards a stronger water cycle management towards the SDGs. So what I wanted to do with these brief snapshots was really to show that water cycle management stakeholder perspectives, they can add a nuance and a depth and a sense of personal engagement to the SDG 6 progress assessment. They have a potential to advance the acceleration of SDG 6 progress by providing positive examples, both of issues, challenges, but also solutions. And of course, we need as many contributions from you, from our participants in the session today, to complete this picture. I will end with that. Thank you for your attention and participation. To make your contributions, please contact me at the email address here for further details, and we look forward to hearing from all of you and to working together towards the Asia Pacific Water Summit next year. Thank you very much for your attention.
So thank you so much for your introduction about the, our APWF, collaborative activity to make the, assessing SDG progress report from water cycle perspective of water cycle management stakeholder perspective. So I really would like to ask all the audience of this session will also kindly contribute to this report. Then bring all outcome of the report for the Asia Pacific Water Summit held in April 2020 in Kumamoto, Japan. So the time is limited. So we would like to move on to the panel discussion with speakers and audience. Now I would like to invite Dr. Hans Denker as a moderator of this session. He is also the leader of Water Cycle Management Working Group of Asia Pacific Water Summit. Hans, thank you so much for your coordination.
Thank you very much, Yumiko, and thank you everyone for the presentations, for the contributions to today's session. We have a couple of questions submitted to us through the chat room of this session, so I'd like to go straight to those. And begin by asking our panelists and speakers to respond to the questions we have received, which I think are very relevant to the discussion we've had today. Now, first we have a question for Kurt, for our first presenter from ESCAP, and that question concerns the lack of data for SDG progress tracking. How can we help and assist countries in the region to overcome the lack of data, and how can we arrive at a responsible assessment of the SDGs when we are lacking key data? So maybe from your perspective, Kurt, some ideas on how countries and individuals can overcome and contribute to this situation. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say thanks for the question, Hans. And I think it's a very good question. It's a challenge not just for SDG 6, but for many of the SDGs across the 2030 agenda. I think that there are some mechanisms that are in place that will, over time, improve data collection and interpretation. The first I would mention is the voluntary national review process, in which national statistics offices are engaged with the custodian agencies at the national level for the implementation of the 2030 agenda. And as those voluntary national reviews, or VNRs, are done on a periodic basis, those data gaps are really beginning to be very evident and are starting to fill as countries work towards their next VNR. The next mechanism that is in support of voluntary reviews and national reporting are voluntary local reviews. And this goes to the issue of vertical integration of policies. There is often a lot of data available at the local level that doesn't filter up into the national reporting against the 2030 agenda, but there are still some data gaps, as we all know, at the local level as well. But these two mechanisms, voluntary national reviews and voluntary local reviews, will, we think, identify those gaps and help to establish interventions and capacity building activities to support. The next thing I would mention is that it's not always necessarily a data action that is required. In some cases, necessary fiscal reforms for water utility systems can lead to improved data. So if a system is looking at, how do they generate the revenue, how can they improve their billing system, all of that goes to kind of the structural capacities that are necessary to improve, collect, and use data going forward. So those mechanisms are available, and I think some of these processes will continue. But data challenges are always going to be an issue. Much of what I presented was drawn from UN Water initiatives as well. They have an SDG 6 data portal that was released earlier this year, and has a lot of information on how data can be collected and where those gaps can be filled.
Thank you very much, Kurt. Very much appreciated. We're running very close to the end of our session, so I'd like to get just one more question, really open to all of the panelists, and that concerns the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. I think we've seen several examples during the session on the challenges that the pandemic has posed, but I was wondering if we could have maybe one or two examples, if we have the time, of areas where the pandemic has helped to generate or leverage new experiences and knowledge that will help strengthen water cycle management as we go forward from here. I don't know if any panelists would like to pick up this question directly. Otherwise, I might ask one of you to do so. But I wanted to hear if anyone would like to just volunteer on some maybe positive experiences or positive outcomes of addressing the pandemic that might be used in us going forward. In that case, maybe Manohara, if I can ask you, because I took note in your stakeholder assessment, you mentioned in Nepal that the pandemic had helped give a new attention to the significance of, also in terms of financing of sanitation, for example, and related issues. Is there anything you can add to that in terms of how we move forward with a positive experience from the impact of the pandemic? Thank you.
Thank you, Hans. Yes, definitely. Pandemic. I think pandemic has not only become a challenge. It has also created opportunity. In the context of Nepal, also, like because of pandemic, there is a awareness and sensitization on the role of water solution, water importance of water-based intervention, and also health. Role of water in sanitation and water supply, that also very much connected with the health impact of the people impacted by the pandemic. At the same time, we also see the pandemic in relation to the access to the technology information around the behavior of water and sanitation system, So this has been a bit of opportunity in the context of where do we focus? You know, when you discuss of the linkages between COVID and WAS, there is very much connection. So more focus is needed to invest for water supply system and on the WAS sector, with focus on WAS as a solution to build the resilience of those people who are impacted by COVID. Because especially impacted people are women, youth, returned migrant, and also marginalized community and poor people. I see this is opportunity for investment and also intervention. Yes.
Thank you. I'm so sorry. I think we are running out of time, but I'd very much like to end on that positive note, this idea of an opportunity. So from me, in terms of wrap up, we are really out of time. So thank you so much, everyone. And thank you to Yumiko and APWF for coordinating the session, to all of the presenters and to all of our participants. Apologies if we couldn't take every question. Now we can follow up with you after the session to do that. So thank you very much from my side. I will end here. Yumiko, any final words from you as we close?
Okay. So thank you so much for Hans for moderating, panel discussion within very, very short time. And I also thank you for all presenters of this session to prepare well with very, very informative presentation. I also thank you to all audience to choose our session and listen to our session. Now, we will continuously working for the examination, how to enhance understanding of all elements of water cycle and how to enhance water governance mechanism through it to enhance resilience and delivery of the commitment of SDG 6 for water security in Asia Pacific. This topic is very, very important topic for 4th Asia Pacific Water Summit. So your continuous contribution and discussion with us is cordially appreciated. Thank you so much for listening our session.